QI Job Centre. Scanning the situations vacant tonight are retired civil servant Sarah Millican, former cloakroom attendant David Mitchell, unemployed pianist and saxophonist the Reverend Richard Cole, and ex-Epping Flea Market sandwich board man Alan Davies. By their buzzers shall ye know them. And Sarah goes... Ooh. And David goes... That's a cloakroom being attended. Richard goes... Oh, bless you, I've heard your Waterloo Bridge. And Alan goes...
Sandwiches, sandwiches.
That's what you mean by sandwich board, is it?
I'd like to say the cloakroom I attended was for actual cloaks. It wasn't a euphemism.
Oh, it really was a cloakroom.
It was for where people left their coats and bags, and I suppose the occasional cloak. But it being in the 20th century, it wasn't very cloak-heavy.
No.
Perhaps they actually do have a cloak. It's standard issue for clergymen.
Oh, yes, you would have one, wouldn't you?
Has it got pockets?
It's got deep poacher's pockets, so you can keep things like holy water in there if you wish to.
In case you happen to meet a girl who's possessed by the devil.
Exactly. But also, it's a practical garment. There's sort of bits, special tapes and bits you can hang on to and wrap round yourself. I recommend them. They're lovely.
And is it true, do you kiss your stole before putting it over your shoulder?
Yes, you do. There's a special prayer when you're getting kitted up. So you kiss the cross and you say a prayer as it goes over your neck.
I'm just thinking of Max von Sydow going, the beast will say many things. The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you. And then the green vomit comes out and... Have you done any of those?
Well, actually, I have done a couple
of... Let's just forget all the questions. I'm going to get down to... Exorcisms is more interesting.
Well, we call it deliverance now, rather like the takeaway man on the moped who comes with the... I was in a parish where there was a major drug problem, and so quite often you'd be called out to people who'd just done a lot of speed.
Right.
And they would describe what had happened, and you realise they were talking about the horror film that was on in the pictures the week before.
Oh. I had a friend who was I don't know if you remember Dom Sylvester Hoerdal.
Oh, yes.
Pretty Abbey. Yeah. And he was called in to do not an exorcism, but a man said he was Napoleon. And Dom Sylvester said, well, that's unfortunate for you, because I am Wellington.
There was a friend of mine who had a psychiatric unit in his parish, and there was a gentleman there who thought he was God and would sort of follow Donald round the unit, asking him hard questions about the hypostatic union and things like that.
Oh, my God.
And so one day Donald got a bit impatient with him and turned to him and said, look, actually, if you are God, would you kindly settle once and for all the exact nature of the relation of the three persons of the Trinity? And the man said, I never talk shop.
Listen, we're way off base here. But I'm having a good conversation, and that, in the end, is what QI is supposed to be about. So let's begin with our first question. Confucius once said, give someone a job they love, and they'll never have to work again. So, what sort of jobs are these? We've given you what, in the social media world, as you know, is called a cloud.
Sandwiches.
Yep. That's only going to get funnier, isn't it?
I hope so.
Yeah.
A ripper is a murderer.
Well, obviously, yes.
A highly skilled murderer.
Yes, in Whitechapel, usually.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Sometimes it...
Most,
I knew that was
These days, most murderers are amateur, though, aren't they? It's very difficult to make a living out of it.
Good job, yeah. No, that's a good
true.
point.
A ripper, actually, you might know, there is a word, it's the kind of word, a crossword, Fiend might know, riparian, R-I-P-A-R-I-A-N. R-I-P-A-R-I-A-N, riparian. Does that mean anything to you?
I feel it should.
Yes. Comes from the Latin ripa, riverbank. So the riparian means of the riverside, of the riverbank. He's a fish seller who sells fish off the
This
bank.
is like a 3-2-1 clip.
I know.
I thought we're getting someone's going to be someone who repairs the banks of rivers. Okay, no, he sells fish now.
I'm so sorry.
Grailer? Is that presumably someone who grills burgers?
Just the general spelling in the average burger joint. Did you know a burgrailer was someone who removed burrs from the teeth of combs in a cotton mill?
I thought it was going to be from the Queen Mother.
And we have a willier, which comes from the same, same profession.
Is that someone who was both in the Black Eyed Peas and the Wurzels?
Oh, Will, are you?
Will I are. Oh, very good. Excellent. You see, your years working with Jimmy Somerville and the Communards have not dulled the edge of your wit, I'm glad to see. It's actually a woolier, it's also called a woolier, but woolier is a more common name for it. And it's, again, we're back in the world of the loom, operating a willieing machine, which simply... Yes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Wharfinger, you might be able to work out. There's an odd thing that we do in English, which is that we add the letter N where one isn't necessary. So, for example, if someone is on a passage, on a journey, we don't call them a passenger, we call them a passenger. If someone sends a message, we don't call them a messenger, we call them a messenger. It's a very odd English thing of adding this N. And a wharfager is someone who might...
Wharfage?
Yeah, own a wharf. Basically, a wharf owner is a wharfinger.
Do people own wharves now?
These days, you don't meet many people. So,
I've never met a
I'm
wharf
in the
owner.
wharf business.
Yeah.
Actually, you might have Worf.
Got a lovely wharf.
Star Trek: The Second Generation had a character called Worf, didn't he? He was a Klingon with a big nose.
Was he?
Yes. And no sense of
You
humour.
surprise me with the moments when you dip into popular culture, which ones you choose.
I am secretly a bit of a Trekkie, I have to say.
Make it so.
Could you play Vulcan chess?
Oh, no, that's
Do you
very
remember
difficult.
Vulcan
Oh, I
chess?
remember Vulcan chess.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. And T'Pau, do you remember there's a pop group called T'Pau?
toured with them.
That took their name from an episode of Star Trek.
You toured with T'Pau.
Well, when you're on tour, if you're in a band, you tend to be on the same circuit as other bands, and we used to bump into Carol Decker, who was the singer from T'Pau. You'd be in a hotel with T'Pau and Public Image. So you'd be having your breakfast between John
Lovely
Lydon
story.
and Carol Decker in a strange, weird
I'd
sort
like to see you partying with Sean Ryder from...
But there was no party, because actually if you're on tour, you're so busy, everyone is in bed by 10. It's the people around.
No, maybe they didn't tell you about the parties. I once stayed in a hotel in America with Black Grape, which was the band that Sean Ryder formed after he left, Manchester. And it was so rowdy on the floor of the hotel.
Rowdy.
When I woke up... when I woke up the next morning, I opened the door and there was a bottle of extremely high-quality brandy with a little note saying, "Hope you won't disturb, love, Sean." And I looked all the way down both sides of the corridor and there was a bottle of brandy.
We did have a bass player who came down one morning as we were checking out and said he'd trashed his room last night. We were quite pleased because no one had ever done that in our band at all. But it turned out that actually what he'd done was tear up a copy of The Guardian. And we made him go and tidy it up again.
A nut steamer.
Yes.
Is that somebody who works in a spa?
Sounds right. Does sound right.
Flong maker.
Yes.
I have a theory that this might be a gentleman who makes foundation garments for ladies, and it's those very thin things which are a cross between a thong and dental floss.
Oh, I know just what you mean.
Yes.
An arse floss
Yes.
piece of... yes, horrible, yes. The person cleaning it is the one you feel sorry for. No, flong actually is a corruption of the French word flan, as in flan. It means a heavy base.
Oh, it's interesting.
And it's actually from the word printing. What the flong made was actually... It was because it was solid. The Greek for solid is stereo. And it was known as stereotyping. Because you were making the same thing each time. You made a stereotype. And oddly enough, the noise the ink made was rendered as cliché. The noise... noise that made when you rolled the ink. So both stereotype and cliché, which sort of mean the same thing, are both printers' terms.
So literally a cliché is made by stereotype.
Yes, exactly. Which is incredibly pleasing.
Yeah.
And we're only here to be quite interesting. We don't expect you to be rolling on the floor, barking like a seal, vomiting with laughter at that thought. But I do hope you will take it home, wrap it in a little parcel of lavender paper and store it in the bottom heart of your drawer.
I'm
Worried I'll get
planning
it wrong.
Yeah, OK.
I'm planning to slightly misremember it.
Oh,
Say
yeah.
some version of it in 20 years' time.
So, the one we can't help you with is a macaroni loper. No one seems to know. We think it may be simply some sort of pasta job of twisting macaroni into
Making necklaces out of macaroni, that's what
yeah. But the reason we know all these are all jobs is the 1891 UK census. People had to put their profession, and these are just some of the
So
professions.
we just know that someone in the 1891 census, or probably more than one person, said, "Oh, I'm a macaroni loper."
Yes.
And no one's ever explained.
No, unfortunately.
Because nowadays in the census, don't some people, they put that their religion is Jedi
Oh,
as a sort
yes.
of joke.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
the macaroni lopers are having a laugh at our expense.
Yeah.
I once had to have a discussion about that when I was involved in prison chaplaincy, because one of the prisoners wanted a Jedi chaplain.
No.
Yeah. In the end, we found a shaman in Lincoln who did the job.
And did he come with a little lightsaber?
No, he had a shaking stick, but we thought that was as near as we could get, yeah.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
Star Wars will outlive all the major religions, I'm sure.
You think?
Yeah.
Maybe it will. Maybe it will.
You want Lee walk at the back?
Anyway, there we go. That's question one over with. How does snake farming work?
You plant them in the ground.
Unless they're doing the actual farming, that might be quite tricky. Just put them on a tractor and watch them go.
Well, there was one great snake farmer called Bill Hast, who lived from 1910 to the year 2011. And he died 100 years old. And he specialised in handling snakes, venomous snakes. And how do you think he protected himself from being bitten?
Cut the heads off.
No, he kept them very much alive and made a lot of money out of
Can you sort of
them.
get used to it?
That's the point. In fact, he got himself bitten so much, he became immune. He was bitten over 120 times. First time when he was 12. 20 times almost fatally, he said. You may say, well, he was just a dick. He was just someone who just wanted to show off. But actually, he did it for a reason, and that was to save other people. His blood was so rich in the antibodies.
Interesting. I mean, because there are snake handlers, of course, are religious
Yes.
people in America, in some of the southern states
Oh,
of
you
America.
have to drag religion into everything.
Sorry, the bishop's watching. They, because they take rather at face value a text from the Gospel of Mark, in which says that, you know, you shall not be hurt by a serpent if you are kind of in our club. And so they go around picking up serpents, and of course most of them die hideously of snake bites sooner or later. But they don't seem to develop this...
No, I think the point is you have to build it up. Well, there you go. You might also know of a king of Pontus. Northern Turkey is where Pontus is. And there was a king there, Mithridates, and he was very much an enemy of Rome, and he was convinced he was going to be poisoned, and he was one of the first people we know of who made himself immune to poisons by taking small amounts of them. And sure enough, he was indeed cornered by the Roman general Pompey, and he took poison, a really, really strong dose, and it still didn't kill him, so he had to get his servant to stab him to death. So,
I went to India on holiday, and there was a bit of food going on, and there were some green chilies in a glass. Now, some green chilies are quite chewable and dippable.
and some are so not.
And I picked this one up, and I could see 3 Indian ladies peering around their heads round. They were actually nudging one another, because they'd clearly put these out as a trap. And they nibbled the very end of it, and then I was numbed down the side of my face for for several minutes.
Terrifying.
But while I was there was a story about an Indian woman who could eat... She set a record that's in the Guinness Book of Records or something. I mean,
Yeah.
dozens of these things.
Yeah.
Same principle, I suppose, building up
Yes,
tolerance.
you do.
Have you been to Iceland?
No.
Oh, the smelly fish.
Hackerl. Have you had hackerl?
Never had it, no.
They give you this dish, and it's got these little cubes of foul-smelling strong cheese on it, and you should take this cheese and you eat it. It's absolutely disgusting. And they go, ho, 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 ho. And you go, that's the worst cheese I've ever tasted. They go, it's not cheese. What is it? And hackerl is they kill a shark, and then they bury it in sand on a beach so it putrefies in its own urine.
Yes.
They do. And then they dig it up and they cut it into cubes and give it to tourists.
supposed to feel sorry for their financial crisis. Yeah. Up yours, Bjork.
Were they worried that tourism was going to get out of hand on that
How bad do things have to be that putrefied urinous shark meat is your delicacy?
It's true. Gracious me. I think we should move on. So, what might an inspector of nuisances do?
Did nuisance used to mean something else? Was it like nuisance meaning a noise or a
Well, yes, a
party
noise. It
or
would
a-
include a noise, yes. It was basically kind of an equivalent of today's environmental health officer. They were appointed by the local authority, a sanitary and health
One man's nuisance is another man's rowdy evening in the hotel, isn't it? I mean,
Yes,
really,
but
who
this is
decides
like,
what a nuisance
Well,
is?
this is like, you know, if your neighbour is a hoarder or they're smelly. This was in days before the more common sanitation that we expect. So if it was really smelly, very noisy, they would also disinfect houses that had had smallpox. They were also responsible for the scavengers. And what were the scavengers?
Were they people who made a living through going through the leavings of others?
That's what you would think, wouldn't it? Like sort of mudlarkers going through the beaches. It actually had a more specific and unsavoury meaning originally.
Waste.
Waste. Night soil
Night
men,
soil.
they used to be called.
They
Night soil.
stole poo.
Well, not stole, but...
Just ones you've done in the night.
People had... people had outside jackses that were not connected to any system of sewers.
They were just a hole.
There was just a hole, and so there would be a pile of poo, and the night soil man would come with his spade, and he'd take your poo away.
Right.
And that was a job, not a pleasant one. They were known as scavengers. And it was a deeply unpleasant but deeply necessary job, obviously.
Would you have to tip your scavenger? You know, like, you have to do, like, milkman and postman at Christmas.
It's a very good question.
You leave a Christmas box.
You leave a Christmas box, especially perfect varnished stool. The best stool you produce,
I had
you save it up for
I
it.
had a thoroughly good dinner that day, and I think that's quality.
That's right, you can't spot a nut or a crack in it. It's lovely, lovely. That's what you do.
It doesn't remain in that... So I know this because I was a chaplain for a bit in Uganda, and they have scavengers, night soil people there. But I only saw it once, and I shudder to recall it, but it was sort of mulched down, if I may put it that way.
It
So
loses
it's not in its shape and form.
It's slop.
Slop.
The same thing happens with squirty cream.
Exactly.
Comes out a lovely
Yes,
shape,
you're
but
right.
leave it for a few minutes and it's all
Loses
gone.
its form,
It
doesn't
does,
it?
yeah.
And no one likes a stool that's lost its form.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just
Points
ruined
deducted.
squirty
Points deducted for a sloppy stool. Anyway, enough. I'm ready. Let's move on. Now, what is it about software engineers that drives people to violence?
I've got a theory about software engineers, or the problem with software engineers, is that they're all really into computers.
Yes.
And they say, why not have a little twiddly bit that does that when you do that? That would look pretty. Well, you say, well, the upside is it would look pretty. The downside is that's another thing that doesn't work.
It takes up processing power or speed or...
Do they call them
Exactly.
twiddly bits?
They've probably got some technical name even for twiddly
The
bits.
usual word is feature.
Yeah.
Well, that's certainly one thing that is annoying.
I don't like software which anticipates needs I don't have. The sort of spell checker thing which corrects your spelling which you didn't want to spell. I've got RSI now from correcting the corrections on my phone.
If I want to type the C word, and I do sometimes, it comes up with Cynthia, and that's my mother-in-law's name. And she's lovely. It seems so unfair.
Let's hope it doesn't
What's
work the other way
offending
round.
Well, unfortunately, in the original Greek, it is Kunthia. Is
it?
There is no letter Y in Greek. It's an upsilon.
That's
It's a U.
alarming.
It is Kunthia. Now, I'm going back to the very first software engineer that ever was.
Babbage.
Well, Babbage owed an enormous debt to this person.
Ada Lovelace.
Ada Lovelace also owed a debt to this person.
I'll
Ada
get the
Lovelace
cloak.
wanted to use the... You've done very well. Ada Lovelace was the daughter of...
Mr. Software.
So disappointing.
Because, you know, you have a Mr. Baker, don't you?
Yes, you do.
And a Mr.
Oh.
Butcher.
Old
Mr.
Jeremiah
Cooper.
Software.
But it's so much more interesting now. She happened to be the daughter of Lord Byron, and she was one of the great mathematicians of her age. And she was a woman we should celebrate. And she was a colleague, as you say, of Charles Babbage. And they had got their difference engine, and they wanted to steal the idea of a Frenchman who'd come up with the idea. It's a software idea. It was for automating something. As a little boy, he used to sit on a particular type of machine and watch it working and thinking, I could make this better. And he invented a punch card system for it. And he has, its name is...
It's not those pianos that
No,
play
no,
themselves.
pianolas used the same system, but this is before that. It's much more useful because it made something everybody in the world wanted to buy, which is clothes and textiles.
Oh, is it for, like, a pattern on
A loom.
cloth?
A loom.
Right.
It's a loom, and it's a particular kind of loom. Jacquard is the name. Joseph Marie Jacquard. And he was an extraordinary man, born in 1752. And these looms were used right up until our lifetimes. There you are.
Look at that.
That's what he invented. Now, you look at those punch cards, you think, now, what can that do? Babbage correctly saw this couldn't just make a loom and a tapestry and a picture, but it could also possibly do calculations and other such things that mathematicians were interested in. And so we have a portrait of Jacquard himself, which is done in woven silk using a Jacquard loom. That is done by punched cards. Isn't that astonishing? The depth, the tone, look at the knees there, the way the cloth is. I mean,
Looks almost like a photograph.
It almost looks like a photograph.
Yeah.
You think
That
you'd be
is-
happier, wouldn't you?
well, that's true. Smiling in photographs is a very recent thing.
Oh,
It was
really?
never considered normal. It was considered weird to smile. But the question was, why did he drive people to violence?
Ah, because he... Was it like Luddites? Did they come and smash his machinery?
They did, because it took so much work
These are
away
the
from it.
shoe throwers, the
Ah.
saboteurs,
And what's the French for a wooden shoe?
the sabot.
A sabot is a clog, and they would throw their clogs into the looms to break them up. And a sabot was known as sabotage, and that's where we get our word sabotage. They would sabotage his machines. And actually, Luddites in Britain were nothing like as violent as the saboteurs of France in Lyon and places like
Different
that.
footwear, I suppose.
Different footwear.
Do more with a clog, can't you, than a conventional shoe?
We had an outbreak of it in my parish.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. It's a shoe area, so when the automation of the shoe trade came in, there was a bit of smashing up of machines.
That's a nightmare, though, because if the people are destroying the machines with shoes, if the machine's still going, they're just making ammunition for their own destruction.
I don't think they use shoes.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's
Just
the irony
as
of
they
it.
come out, chuck them back at the machine.
You don't have to use shoes to make a machine break. It just the French wore wooden clogs and those sabots. But it is fascinating, isn't it, to think...
Where would we be without trees?
Well, so true. You're right. Anyway, the first automated looms caused rioting by French weavers. Name as many famous butlers as you can.
Jeeves.
Jeeves. Jeeves was not a butler.
Was he not a butler? Was he a man?
He was a valet. He was
valet.
a gentleman's personal gentleman.
Sorry.
What about Hudson from Upstairs
Hudson would
Downstairs?
certainly count, yes, absolutely. A butler has to be head of a household. A valet is a personal attendant, a gentleman's personal gentleman. Oh, Christ.
I mean, you got away with this, didn't you, really? Because you were quite young to play the role.
were,
really,
yes,
weren't
I
you?
was young,
I mean, you in particular, because he was quite a bit older, isn't he?
Well, in Carry On Jeeves, which is the very first appearance of Jeeves in Woodhouse, a darkish, youngish chap stood in the doorway, is the only physical description you get of Jeeves. But as Bertie Wooster said of him, although he is not a butler, if it comes down to it, he can buttle with the best of them. But a butler was literally a bottler, looked after the cellar.
John Gielgud in Arthur.
Yes, he
that
played...
character.
was he a butler or was he a valet?
I think
It's hard
he
to
was-
tell.
I'm saying
A man, my man. You know, they used to say, my man. that the 5th Duke of Portland was so relied on his valet that when the doctor visited, the doctor would stand outside the room, the valet would do the rummaging around and call out what he saw. He was like, I'm just inserting my finger into his grace now. I would say it's a sort of yellowy-blue colour. The doctor would say, that's a very bad sign or a very good sign.
All 5 of his grace's testicles are in order.
It is the most bizarre thing. Many years ago, I was asked, as I'm sure you've been asked, to address the Oxford Union.
They have asked me, but I always imagine that they just ask me along just so they can go...
No! They love you. They'd also just...
We have an entertainment. Ask him something.
We've got to make the crowd dance.
You want someone from
He doesn't know.
Take my cloak.
No. I went, and I remember this quite, even for Oxford, astonishing young man in a wing collar who was wearing an extraordinary manner, and whose name was Jacob Rees-Mogg, and he was the son of William Rees-Mogg, who had, for a time, been the editor of
he's
The
an
Times.
MP now, isn't
and
he?
he's now an MP, and he's... we may have a picture of him. There he is. You're never going to mistake him for an Essex chav, are you? Surprisingly...
River dancing.
He's tall, isn't he? He's bigger than the houses.
He is very tall. There may be a parallax effect, I'm not sure. But anyway, he was infuriated when leafleting the streets of Central Fife, but the fact that he was mocked because he was assisted by his nanny. What was so extraordinary was his response. His response was, well, I do wish you wouldn't keep going on about my nanny. If I had a valet, you'd think it was perfectly normal.
Man of the people.
I've had a tweet relationship with Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Is he a Twitter friend?
Well, I think I don't know if it's actually him, but he quotes to me Anglican psalms.
That's very like him.
I can't think there would be anyone who wasn't him who would want to do that.
It does seem a very strange pastime, I have to say.
He's
But
stopped
anyway,
talking to me now, though, but he did for a
well,
while.
he's very busy running the country with his nanny and his valet.
Well, I think the valet was doing the
Mary
tweeting
Poppins
for him.
and Jeeves are helping him out. That's all we need worry about. Thank goodness. All is well in the world of Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I'm sure he's a lovely man. Anyway, Jeeves was a valet, not a butler. What use is a sheep in a gold rush? Yes.
Can be cold and lonely on those prairies.
Yes, that's the first thing that would come into a
Huddle
man's
for
mind.
warmth, Stephen. Huddle together
for warmth.
for
No,
warmth.
well, the gold rushes aren't always in cold countries,
Is that what? Hang on, the Lord is your shepherd, and you give him that on his own. He might shaft you.
I believe his rod comforts you.
They didn't teach me anything at theological college about this. It's not that
Oh, sorry, I do apologise.
Would you filter stuff through wool, thereby extracting the golden
The
oil?
man is right on the money, quite literally. It's exactly what you do. Exactly what you do. You take the fleece and the water runs through it and it leaves behind the flecks of gold, and then you dry the fleece and shake them out. It's as simple as that. It's a very good way. Better than panning. And there are people who believe, indeed there's one man who wrote a book about it. His name is Tim Severin. He wrote a book called The Jason Voyage. He's one of those people who believes a lot of Greek myths, a lot of myths generally, are based on originally true stories that have become exaggerated. And he believes the Golden Fleece may be one such an example. Jason may well have taken a golden fleece that someone had been using for panning for gold. So, now, what are the Swiss planning to tidy up next? Those good old Swiss. Yes,
They,
Sarah.
army knives, that's what I was going to say. Are they going to tidy them up because there's loads of useless things on them?
No, I know what you mean. To
knife.
reduce the number of
Yeah,
stuff
just
on
to
them.
make it just a knife.
But they do actually have a plan to do some really serious cleaning, which will cost millions, but is, I'm afraid, very necessary.
Is it in space?
Yes. Well done, Alan Davis. What's the problem in space?
Too many old satellites.
Debris,
round about.
space debris.
As soon as we started going up there, we started leaving crap everywhere we went.
And
It's so human, isn't it?
Even if...
It's like a festival.
Even if it's a chip of paint, you have to remember it's orbiting at 18,000 miles an hour.
Well, that
so
in
it
your
hits
eye.
something else, they shatter. So more and more shatter into smaller and smaller pieces, which makes it harder and harder to clear them up. So we're with the Swiss in space. They're attempting, technically, to find ways of clearing up this debris, which is a serious
Dyson.
worry.
You need a Dyson.
Well, you need one hell of a dose.
Dyson
why
was
the-
thinking of something.
Why the Swiss?
It's
Why
interesting,
have they
isn't it?
taken it upon themselves after years of not
you
joining
know-
in and
Maybe they're-
stockpiling Nazi gold?
you know-
Why now they have to experience
I've
it?
got a horrible thought. It might be for profit.
Oh, they're not just a bit OCD.
I don't think... Well, it could be a mixture. I've been to Switzerland. It is a very clean and tidy country. It was the first country I ever went to years ago. I was tiny, which had photoelectric cells in the urinals. And so when I left, it flushed, and I thought... And I heard a little click, and so I just went back and forth. And someone came in and saw me doing this.
That means, basically, that urinal, if it consents when you've gone to flush, it's a robot.
Yes.
It's like the debris in space. As soon as we create artificial intelligence, we abuse it sexually.
Anyway, moving on, sorry. Let me give you the information on this. The fact is, after 50 years now of space exploration, the Earth is surrounded by junk from old satellites and spent rocket casings and so on, all down to small pieces of wire and chips of paint, all hazardous to current satellites, on which our lives are beginning to depend. GPS and so on, and peacekeeping and all kinds of
Grindr.
things. Oh, Grindr, God, yes. What would we do without Grindr? There are apparently 480 million copper needles because of some bloody stupid thing called Operation Westford, which was an American project from between 61 and 3 to create an artificial ionosphere out of copper that they could bounce radio signals off. They actually wanted to seal the Earth. I mean, how mad is that? So that's left all that junk. Anyway, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne has a project called Clean Space One. There they are in the snow looking... Actually, that's Telly Savalas' hideout on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Anyway, they will have a series of janitor satellites. They will manoeuvre alongside the unwanted object, grapple it with a claw, there you are, then dive into the atmosphere. So it's going to, first of all, grapple it with its claw. Ta-da!
Oh, you can do this on Brighton Pier.
Yes, exactly. And then it goes... The problem is that the actual janitor thing is also destroyed. They both burn up in the atmosphere.
So for every speck or needle,
Yeah.
you have to send up a separate
Which
little old
costs
lady with a claw.
£27 million each
Well, that's
one
really
of those.
cheap.
That's what I mean by saying...
You just need a shovey thing that shoves it into the atmosphere.
What about some sort of... I mean, I've admittedly haven't given this much thought, but some sort of Hoover? You know, some sort of sucking thing?
Giant funnel.
Yeah.
You'd think a
Yeah,
giant
I mean, does
funnel.
sucking work in
Well,
the
there's
outer atmosphere?
There are
'cause
two
there's no
directions.
air?
There are two directions you want them to go in. You either want them to stop being in orbit and come in and be burnt up in the atmosphere, or you want to push them out into space, which is a bit loutish.
It's even more literary, isn't
Frankly,
it?
it is loutish. Yeah. We Brits have come up with a different solution at the University of Surrey, and that's a nano-satellite the size of a shoebox, and it contains a 25-square-metre solar sail. So when unfolded, this cube sail, as they call it, is driven along by photons from the sun, and it carries any junk and takes it out into outer space. In due course, devices like these may have to be built into anything that's ever allowed up into space again, must have on it something that will help with the problem. But that's the problem. At the moment, the Swiss have their $27 million machine. So there you are. Now, what would be the best planet in the solar system to take your annual holiday in? Or on? Yes.
Earth.
Absolutely the right answer, I frankly say. I don't think there could be a better answer.
Well, the great advantage of Earth is that you can survive on it.
Yes.
So lovely on a holiday, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
To just
breathe
live
air
through
again.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hello.
Uranus,
Why Uranus?
because it would be much longer.
Ah, now there you're getting very interesting. It's about how long a year is or a season is.
How long is a Uranian year?
A Uranian year is 84 Earth years.
84.
But each day is only 17 hours, so again, it spins faster than us.
So how long would a fortnight be?
It's a very good question indeed.
17 times 14 would be a
Would be a
fortnight.
fortnight.
How long's a year on Jupiter, then?
A year is about 12 of our years, but it spins very quickly. So a day on Jupiter is only about 10 hours.
So you might not get a longer holiday the further away from...
And I think I'd need those things that go around your wrists so you don't get travel sick if it's spinning like that.
Jupiter is also entirely gas, which is not really very nice. The shopping and the sightseeing opportunities are amazing. A layer of black liquid hydrogen, 27,000 miles thick, crushes carbon into diamonds that are literally the size of the Ritz. So you could really get some serious bling from Jupiter.
Try to deal with that.
Yeah.
Sort of that a diamond the size of a hotel.
And another thing that's rather exciting is that it precipitates neon rather than water in the atmosphere, which creates brilliant, bright red rain. It's fabulous. That would be so pretty. So, but,
it'd be lovely to go, wouldn't it?
That there...
You don't want rain on holiday, though, do you, even if it's bunny?
That storm, that eye, as they call it, which is in the middle of Jupiter, is about 4 times the size of the Earth, so that's, you know...
So essentially, Jupiter's a nightmare, because if your annual holiday, not only is it a shorter fortnight, it only happens once every 10 years.
Yes, that is true.
Very bad.
Venus, on the other hand, rotates incredibly slowly. A fortnight's break on Venus would last over 15 years. That's how long the days are.
But you need factor 980 there.
Oh, the weather is awful. It's clouds of sulfuric acid. The surface is hot enough to melt aluminium, so you need really thick flip-flops. And the atmospheric pressure is equivalent to being half a mile under the sea on Earth. The air isn't very fresh. It's mostly carbon dioxide. So it really is a bit... It's a bit like being in an Ibizan club at about 6 in the morning.
You'd only want a week there, wouldn't you? You'd only want a week.
You'd only want a week on Venus.
Years.
I think you're right. So, now I have a dubious theory about Alice in Wonderland for you, if you're quite interested.
A dubious theory from Stephen Fry.
Yes. Alice in Wonderland isn't a wildly imaginative children's fantasy after all. It's a bitter, satirical attack on Victorian mathematics. Dubious or not, visit aliceschmalice.co.uk to review the evidence and decide for yourself.
A dubious theory from Stephen Fry.
Well, I like that one, and I like that one a lot.
It's an interesting theory, and there's a book written about it. The fact is, as you know, Alice in Wonderland was written by...
Lewis Carroll.
Who was in real life...
A dog.
Charles Dodge.
A dog. It's so right, the last letter was wrong.
It was a don.
A don.
A don.
Yeah. A don, that's what he meant. In other words, he was a fellow of an...
Autocorrect, autocorrect, damn you, autocorrect!
He was a mathematician at Oxford.
Yeah.
And he was a very conservative, classical mathematician who believed in Euclidean geometry and things like that. And there was a new world coming into maths that would resolve in David Hilbert's famous questions and the Poincaré conjecture and Riemann's hypothesis and all the things that Alan Turing and later mathematicians
The invention of
devoted
number
themselves.
9, of course.
The invention
very controversial. I've never taken to it myself.
Squeezed it in between 7 and 10 and 8 and 10.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah. 8 came even later.
8 came later.
They needed it for the war.
Blind spot.
Yeah.
So weird.
They did it for bingo, I think. No, but the fact is, he didn't like the way that maths was becoming so extraordinarily abstract and pure and less to do with either symbolic logic, which was his particular subject, or, as I say, the beauty of plain geometry, which he loved. And so this particular author, Melanie Bailey, argues that the scenes, particularly the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, the encounter with the hookah-smoking caterpillar, and the meeting with the Duchess whose baby turns into a pig, all that sort of absolute nonsense, he thought typified modern mathematics. And most of all, he added in the later story, the Cheshire Cat, who disappears leaving only a grin. It's a humorous way of making a serious point about the futility of abstraction. How can the cat leave a grin behind? The cat was brilliantly played in the Tim Burton film by who did the voice of the cat? It was superb. Oh, God.
Hugh Laurie.
Hugh Laurie, that's it. That's it. I knew it was someone good. -2,000 points. Anyway, Melanie Bailey, the author of this book, reminds us that his other works are painfully dull and moralistic or very technical works. In fact, Queen Victoria read Alice and loved it so much and said, I do hope, Dr. Dodgson, that you will dedicate your next book to me. So he wrote a book called something like Problems in Symbolic Logic. to Her Majesty Queen Victoria. You must have read it and thought, what the fuck is this?
Queen Victoria bumper book of boring math. Happy Christmas, Your
Anyway,
Majesty.
she says, this lady, Melanie Bailey, that Dodgson was most witty when he was poking fun at something, and only then when the subject matter truly got him riled. Whereas we think of him as just an absurdist, a kind of surrealist, as a nonsense, a master of nonsense. Anyway, it's nice to have dubious theories on our J series, and that's one of them. You can make your mind up yourself. Now, it's time for a jolly jape, this time involving lasers and balloons. What could be coming next? Here we are. And I've got my laser. This is one of these things they use. You know, I'm going to point it behind me. And we're using the smoke because it shows up the laser line. Can you see it there?
Yeah.
I'm deliberately, obviously... I keep shouting in my ear, don't point it at people's eyes. I'm not.
Don't point it at their fucking eyes! It's fucking dangerous!
The thing is, he knows he's the one who's going to be fired. There you are. You can see reasonably well that there is a laser light.
The lighting man, I go,
Right. This is ordinary laser light, the kind you'd use to, you know, conferences to point on maps and all the rest of it. And I'm just going to press the laser here and... Oh!
Whoa.
And... Oh!
Whoa.
And... Oh!
Whoa.
And...
green! Wow, cool!
Nothing. It's not popping, though.
weird.
So, the black ones pop and the white one doesn't. Alan,
Racist.
you should have a... Begin to make sense. Just... I want you... Take your black marker, please. And can you make a black target roughly in the centre of the balloon? And I'm going to let you press the button as a reward if you do it sensibly. So...
Temptation to draw a cock and ball.
I know. A big black spot, so it'll work. So just there. And fill it in as black as you can.
Talk amongst yourselves.
That's right. You could, if you'd worked for Blue Peter, you'd know how to do that while presenting to camera.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, there you see, exactly.
I haven't done a cock and balls, and I know you're disappointed.
They're not.
It's the back of Stephen Fry's head.
Yeah, that's it. It is actually not unlike. OK.
Will that do it, do you
I
think?
reckon that's black enough.
Black enough?
We know that black absorbs light and heat, and white, we know, reflects it. And we saw that the laser had enough energy to burst the black balloon. So all you have to do, just leave it in. It should be pointing in the right direction. Oh! Well done. Very enjoyable.
So what was Darth Vader thinking?
You see, the dark side will always lose. Yeah. Absolutely right. Well, that brings us to the scores, amazingly. And finally, and there is no minus score. Ooh. Wow. In first place...
Patronising bastards.
I've
had points before.
In first place, aided by a first-class brain and, of course, divine assistance with 23 points is Richard Coles. Yeah.
So I'd like to give my points to the poor.
Oh! What a holy man of God.
We're all
booze from the atheists. We know he's only teasing. In second place with plus 13 is David Mitchell. Third place with 8 points is Sarah. Well done, Sarah. And it's not minus. In last place with 0 is Alan Davis. That's all from Sarah, David, Richard, Alan and me. Thank you, good night, and be excellent unto each other. Bye-bye.
More comedy coming up next this evening here on BBC HD. Lisa Tarbuck is the guest host of Never Mind the Buzzcocks. Next.